Whether you want more innovation more easily, you're feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, or you simply know that something isn't quite the way you know it can be, you are not alone. I hear the same from leaders every day. On Uncommon Leadership, we explore aligning personal fulfillment with business success, creating authentic teams, and cultivating the resilience, adaptability, and ease necessary to move beyond simply surviving today's challenges into thriving. I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams, and today we'll uncover fresh insights into what it means to lead today. Joining me is Jordan Stone. Jordan is the Vice President of Engineering at Patient, a growth stage startup focused on making healthcare more accessible and affordable. Prior to Patient, Jordan has led product and engineering teams across industries at large publicly traded companies, digital agencies, and startups. Welcome, Jordan.
Thanks, Michael. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. When did you first recognize that integrating your whole self and bringing that into everything that you do might be a valuable approach?
Yeah, so I started my career in consulting, and it turns out that personality tests, I've come to learn, are something that all consulting companies like to have their employees do. And so early in my career, I was actually in a workshop where we talked about how people tend to have actually two different personalities: their work personality and their at home personality. And the premise was that if you took these personality tests with your work hat on, you might get one set of results, and if you took it with your at home hat on, you would often get a different set of results. And that always struck me as odd, this notion that who I am outside of work, my life experiences, my preferences, my communication style, should somehow be different or irrelevant when I'm at work. And later in my career, when I was working at Deloitte Digital, we were obsessed with user experience. Right, it drove everything that we did. It was really at that time that I saw how folks bringing these kind of non-work experiences and preferences into how they worked, how they thought, how they designed, how they built software, was really really powerful, and I think it really changed my thinking around that.
How many of the other people in that workshop with you fessed up to having getting different results or having different perspectives when the work hat on versus their home life hat?
Yeah, it was sort of positioned as this makes sense, right? Like the person you are at home, the way that you interact with your spouse or your family should somehow be different than how you interact with a customer or a client. And I think what I've found in my career is that those two things are actually very much the same. Even this week, as we were talking in our leadership team at Patient about how we can help our teams be more focused and be less distracted by all of the things that are sort of popping up around us on a day-to-day basis, I found myself referring to an example of helping my daughter with her math homework. And like being able to sort of tie those two things together, I think has ultimately made me a better leader. It has made the leaders on my team better leaders themselves. And so I think it's important that we actually tie those things together and not try to separate them.
I agree. There's we can have separation between work and everything else if we want to without having to separate ourselves into multiple pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have met people who they very consciously go into work trying to be more objective, more logical, more structured, more all sorts of things than they are in the rest of their life because they feel that that's what business requires.
Yeah, I think that there's this persona that, especially as leaders, that we're supposed to maintain, right? That we know all answers, that we never get stressed out, that work is the only thing that is occupying any space in our brains. And I think that first of all, none of those things are true, right? I don't know all the answers. I definitely get stressed out, and there are other things that's occupying space in my brain from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Or whatever those core working hours are. And I think finding ways to kind of integrate those two things together. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily bringing every personal problem to work, or that I would expect the people on my team to be talking about, extremely personal issues necessarily. But I think recognizing that there's this kind of connection and integration between who I am at 7:59 and who I am at 8 o'clock helps to kind of build stronger teams and stronger connections overall.
I agree. And the more that we are able to stay in the zone of our preferences, the more we can, the more energy we have to bring to solving the puzzles that we're there to solve. If we're spending all of our time trying to be very structured when we're in fact very spontaneous, or very logical when we don't spend much time being logical, or that's not a strong suit for us, then that's a whole lot of energy we're putting in to translating who we are into some other parts of the spectrum that we're not able to bring to the problems that we're there to solve.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's an interesting concept of strengths and weaknesses, and this idea that a strength is something that we're really good at, and a weakness is something that we're really bad at, or less good at. And it was actually at Deloitte that the concept was sort of shifted to being one where strengths are those things that give us a lot of energy and sort of motivate us and move us forward, and weaknesses are actually the things that drain our energy. And so, I might be really good at putting together a PowerPoint presentation or reading through a spreadsheet, but man, can I only do that for 30 minutes before my brain is totally fried out. And so, how do we structure our teams where folks are able to kind of leverage those strengths in ways that motivate them to go deeper and go farther, and spend less time on the things that are draining their energy, even if they're naturally good at those things? I think that's kind of the art and balance of team structure, and building high performing teams.
Yes, I like that framing of what drains us versus gives us energy. It's how we always talk about being around people, introvert versus extrovert. That's really about is being around people give us energy or drain it. And it, extending that to everything else we do makes a whole lot of sense. How have you found it is building teams where everyone gets to focus on what gives them energy and divest everything that drains their energy off to other people?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, uh, recognizing that we can't always do just the things that give us energy and never the things that drain us is probably a good realization. But balancing those, and like finding the right balance and making sure that you've got more opportunity to sort of recharge yourself on the things that motivate you than the things that don't. Um, I think with most teams, it really boils down to trust. It starts with trust. You can't just throw a group of people together and tell them that they're a team and expect them to work well together, and to understand what those motivators and those distractors are. Trust is built over time, and it takes time to do that. I think anytime we form a new team at Patient, or even when teams add or lose members. And even sometimes if a team's been working together for a while, and they just kind of need to sort of recenter themselves. I've developed this ways of working workshop that teams use that starts with opportunities for people just to get to know each other and to share. I think the first question is like, what's one or two things about me that other people might not know? What motivates and inspires each of the people on the team? How do you work best? I know that for myself, I tend to be the most focused and energized early in the morning, and less so, later in the day. Other people are obviously the exact opposite of that, and so being able to sort of recognize and understand, who someone is, what their goals are, what they're hoping to get out of this sort of shared experience we call work, is really important. I think it helps folks to better understand themselves. It helps folks to better understand each other, and it's really important for leaders to understand that, because their job is not to just tell people what to do, it's to find those opportunities and those challenges and to match those with the people on their team in ways that helps sort of propel the team forward the fastest. And so I think all of that sort of plays a part.
It really does. And a lot of people recognize that having that sort of an exercise when a team forms is important. Fewer people recognize that doing that when people join or leave is important, which it really is, because the whole team dynamics can change with just one addition or subtraction. Not many
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
not many people recognize that doing this on a regular basis over the team's lifetime is important, because while the people may be the same, they're also not the same. Who I was 6 months ago is not who I am now, is not who I will be 6 months from now. And what lights me up right now may not be what lit me up 6 months ago. And so especially when we're explicitly having that focus on helping people do what gives them energy and reducing their need to do everything else, we really need to keep that up to date over time, because those factors change.
Yeah, agreed.
What signals do you have that a team needs to do this exercise again?
Well, you mentioned two of them, right? Someone joining the team or leaving the team. I think that changes the dynamic. Hopefully not significantly, but a team is really made up of the people uh, who construct it, and so it's helpful to sort of integrate newer additions, or to recalibrate after someone leaves, to kind of do that again. I think some of the other signals are after, like, maybe a really stressful launch or a big push that's maybe happened over a longer period of time. It's again an opportunity to kind of recenter, and to reconnect with the people on the team. Part of that workshop is also talking through how does the team measure success, how does work kind of flow through the system and through the team. And so as the team takes on new responsibilities, or as the product expands, those are also good opportunities to kind of reconnect with each other and recenter the team around sort of shared goals and shared objectives. um, those tend to be the bigger signals. I've had some teams do it just because maybe it's been a really hard quarter. There were a couple of misses on a team, or customers have been particularly demanding, and again, it's just like it's this great opportunity to get back together. And like you said, right, there might be something that's happened in my life that other people don't know about, that's either contributing to the way I'm approaching different problems, or has changed the way that I'm thinking about my own career trajectory and the kinds of challenges and opportunities that I want to be focused on. So it's good, as even as part of just a regular kind of professional development cycle, to have these kinds of conversations on a regular basis.
How do you extend this out to the entity that is the team itself? Just like each of us have things that give us energy and drain us, each team has different things that they're going to do really well that give the team overall energy and that drain that.
Yeah, I think, that kind of comes down to this idea of, we often think about at Patient that the unit of work, the measure of productivity and the measure of outcome and impact is not really actually at the individual level, but it's at the team level, right? Especially in software engineering, there are very few things that uh, an individual can do entirely by themselves, right? The code gets written, but it has to get reviewed by someone else. We're leveraging software, maybe that other parts of our business have written and are running and operating, or the community at large. And so we really think about the team as kind of the unit of work at Patient. And so there are opportunities for teams as they learn and build skills to share that learning out with other teams. So, a common one that we see might be one team's really, really strong at writing documentation. They've really incorporated documentation into their culture. And that's one of those things that tends to drain some people's energy, right? Some individuals' energy. And yet the team has figured out a way to infuse that into their culture, whether that's part of their daily stand-ups. They set aside some time to document together, or we're obviously leveraging AI in a lot of ways to make that a little bit more palatable to folks. And so now the question becomes, well, how can we take that skill, that strength of this one team over here, and help use that to accelerate and build out that skill or that capability on other teams that maybe aren't as mature in that area. And I think we see that in alerting and monitoring. We see that in testing, right? That's a particular mindset that really motivates and drives some people and really drains and tires out other people. And so, if we look at those skills and those competencies at the team level, I think we see the same thing, right? We see teams that excel in some of those areas and teams that are trying to build those skills. And so, it's an opportunity for us to kind of share that knowledge more broadly, so that that sphere of influence tends to grow as the team matures.
How do you build these cultures where everyone feels safe and empowered to bring their unique talents into everything that they do?
Yes, we talked a little bit about trust. Like, I think ultimately it really starts there. I think the other piece is, as leaders, we need to be comfortable modeling that behavior ourselves. One of the hardest skills for me to develop earlier in my career was this ability to say, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or I had an experience early on at one of my first startups where I was just banging my head against this really challenging problem. I could not get over the hump, and for days and for weeks was really trying to solve this problem by myself. And we were sitting around the table. There were four of us at the company at the time. We were sitting around the table, and I finally had to say, "Look, guys, I don't know. I can't figure this out." And it was in that moment that the other three folks at the table said, "Well, we're here to help you figure this out. Like, the company is all of us together. Like, our success is shared success. If you can't figure it out, we can't move the ball forward." And I think for me that was a moment of recognizing that that kind of vulnerability is one, different from the stereotype that we talked about earlier of the leader who kind of knows everything and is confident in every decision and never makes mistakes and never gets stuck. But more than that, I think it showed me that success is a shared outcome. It's not an individual outcome. And so by being comfortable with and saying, "Hey, I'm stuck here. I don't know what to do," or "I'm having a tough time today. I'm not feeling super focused because something's going on outside of work, and my brain is kind of there right now." It helps to kind of create this shared momentum that allows the team or the company to continue to move forward because other folks are able to kind of pick up the mantle and to help kind of drive something forward. And so, as leaders, as managers of teams, as leaders of teams, it starts with building that culture where people feel safe and empowered to do that same sort of thing. They have to see that modeled, right? Because not every culture encourages or supports that kind of behavior, and you don't always want to be the first one to kind of put yourself out there. And so people are going to look up to the leaders of the organization to see that it's safe to operate in that way, to think in that way, to challenge each other in that way. And if you can do that, you'll start to see the people on your team kind of mimic and then eventually adopt and internalize, I think, that behavior as well.
How do you help your leaders bring on that mindset, especially when they're coming from environments where maybe none of this was a thing or safe?
I think, in addition to obviously modeling it yourself, I think it's very helpful to recognize, like publicly recognize when people are modeling that behavior themselves, right? When they're being honest, when they're being vulnerable, when they're using their talents to help solve a problem or to unstick a teammate, even if it's not maybe their primary area of focus, especially for folks I think who are coming from cultures where that behavior might not be normal. Maybe as an example, we've hired some really fantastic engineers at Patient, and early in one of their one of them as he had started at Patient, he was saying to me that he, hey, I just want to let you know I'm taking 30 minutes to get lunch, and I just want to let you know that I've got to leave a little bit early today because I've got this thing to do with my kids. And we kind of had a conversation about, hey, I trust you as an adult who works in a professional setting to do the things that you say that you're going to do, and if you're going to grab lunch or leave early to take the kids to practice or start late because someone's got a doctor's appointment, like that's fine, right? Like I trust that you're going to get done the things that you need to get done, and you have the latitude and the freedom to kind of work within those constraints. And it was very different, I think, than the culture that he had come from previously, where it was very regimented and sort of productivity was measured by butts and seats and hands on keyboard. And so sometimes it takes actually explicitly stating, hey, like here are my expectations, here are the guardrails that you have to work within, and beyond that, I trust you to make the right decision and to do the right thing, because I think ultimately most people want to make the right decision, they want to do the right thing, and if you can sort of create the space for them to do that, um, uh, I have at least found that people tend to rise to the occasion. And so I think it's like I said, modeling that behavior, it's recognizing it when you see it in others, so that other people who are around that person see that those are the things that you as a leader value. Those are ways to, I think, kind of change that behavior and get folks to adopt that kind of a culture.
So, are you then mostly relying on osmosis to bring this culture across and help people come into this? Or are there some more proactive things that you do when you hire someone in to lay out, this is the way we do things here, this is what we expect, this is what we explicitly don't expect you to do? You don't need to tell us every 5 minutes what you're doing, for example.
Yeah. Like most companies, we've got obviously a code of conduct and values, company values that are written down, and I think a lot of those behaviors are stated through our values. So, lifting others, for an example, is one of the values that Patient has, and as folks are coming into the organization, we always pair them up within engineering. We actually pair them with an engineering buddy, someone who's in the engineering organization in a similar role to them. So managers with managers and individual contributors with other ICs, but also with a well, a patient buddy, someone who's outside of the engineering organization, someone who can help answer questions about culture and about norms and those sorts of things. And so, I think creating those connections early on helps to helps to sort of catalyze the behaviors that you want people to exhibit. Our onboarding documentation at Patient also explicitly states some of those things, right? Like we sort of say, hey, your first few weeks here, you're just here to ask questions. You're here to learn. We want you to ask questions. We want you to push those things into public Slack channels because if you're curious about it, there's probably someone else who's curious about it too. And so we try to define some of those values of honesty and transparency and curiosity in the documentation that we have that people read as they're on their first day at Patients. So they understand, hey, we value when you ask questions. We value asking why are we doing something the way that we're doing it, or questioning the status quo, and we do our best to write down all of our decisions so that we can point to what we were thinking at the time, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily still true today. And so, we actively encourage people to investigate and to ask and to challenge in that way.
This is a lot more intention and consciousness brought to this onboarding process than I see in a lot of the companies I work with and talk with. How much of this was there from the start, and how much has evolved over time as you've discovered this is the way to make things better?
I think most of it has evolved over time. What I have found is that tribal knowledge and sort of the norms by osmosis, to sort of use your phrase from earlier, it one it is harder to scale, right? It's harder to, as you get larger and larger. It's really easy when you're 10 people or 15 people for everyone to kind of know what is expected. It starts to get a lot harder once you get to 20 people and 50 people and 100 people. And so it sort of isn't real until it's written down. Otherwise, it's just assumed. And when people are coming into the organization, they don't know which way to assume because they're bringing that other experience from other professional workplaces that they've been in, or for folks who are earlier in their career, they have nothing to model against, right? There's nothing for them to pattern match against. And so a lot of the a lot of the documentation around onboarding is something that I brought to Patient, having seen how challenging it can be for companies to scale quickly without this sort of anchor to keep folks grounded in the things that are important and to help communicate values and ideals. Did we get it right the first time? Absolutely not. Do we continue to evolve that documentation and some of those things as we have grown? Absolutely. As we were going through some rapid scaling last year, one of the teams mentioned that, hey, we don't really understand like how the team estimates work, for example, or how we prioritize different types of work. And we realized that that particular team had existed for so long that that had just sort of become infused in the DNA of who those people were. But as soon as you added someone to the team, that DNA changed, and they couldn't just absorb that knowledge instantaneously. And so we continue to find ways to evolve that documentation, or to clarify the things that are inherently obvious to people who have been at Patient for a long time. I'm coming up on 4 years, and so the things that were not obvious to me when I first started are very obvious to me now, and they're not obvious to people who are starting. And so I think that's one of the benefits of growing your team, or moving people to different teams, right? Like one of the goals that we talk about at Patient a lot is if someone moves to a different team, it shouldn't feel like they're starting at a new company, right? Some of the underpinnings of our culture and our ways of working and our expectations should be the same, and they should be written down so that everyone understands that these are our ideals, these are the things that we value as an organization. And teams work differently, and they have different meeting cadences, and they story points mean different things to different teams, but we should be anchored in the things that we all sort of hold as universal truths for what's important to us as an organization, and sort of how we operate and what we expect from the people that we operate with, those sorts of things.
I like that signal a lot. When I change teams, does it feel like I'm starting over at a new company? The closer to 10 that is, the worse our culture is.
Yeah, or at least the worse your documentation is, if nothing else.
Yes, that could be it. So, what's the business value of doing all this work to help people understand how they work best, to customize the teams, to amplify that, and to keep doing this over and over and over and over as people and teams evolve over time?
Yeah, I think it sounds obvious, but people are not machines, right? Like you can't take four people and put them together and expect them to produce the same output in the same way as four other people put together and presented with the same problem. And so I think part of the challenge and the art of what we do as leaders is to try to figure out how do we sort of structure the puzzle pieces together in a way that allows folks to use their unique talents, to bring their prior experience, to achieve the goals that they have for themselves for the benefit of the business and ultimately the customers that we're serving. I think this idea that working for a company is a one-way street, and that you are there to do things for the company, and as long as they pay you, like everything should be fine and happy, is I think a bit archaic, right? And I very much view our responsibility as leaders within the organization as one where we need to make sure that the folks who are working to help drive the business forward are getting the opportunities that they're seeking, that they leave the day feeling like they have ended more productive than they started, that they've helped to move the company forward in some way. It's something that we look for explicitly when we're hiring, right? Like we look for engineers who are connected to or who care about the outcome of the work that they're doing, not just the act of the work itself. And I think that in doing so, we create teams that are more resilient. We create teams that are more productive. We create teams that have higher durability and tend to stay at the company longer, right? Like one of the most costly things we can do is churn employees over, and especially engineers where we're working in complicated systems, and for patient at least it's in highly regulated environments. People have so much knowledge and understanding of the software that we're building that we should be invested in making sure that they what I often say is that they see a long tail for themselves at patient, right? They can see that even if they're not working on the same thing 2, 3, 5 years from now, they're still at patient working on something, because this is the place where they can be challenged and grow and create enduring relationships. All of those things I think help ultimately make for a better business that builds better products that better serve their customers. That's ultimately why we do what we do, right? It's not just software for the sake of software. And I think all of those things play a part.
There's some of the business value then that by demonstrating that you care about your people, that increases the likelihood that they will care back about the company.
I think so. Yeah, I really do think so. And I think, especially in an organization like Patient, which is at least partially remote, um, I saw this a lot after 2020, where we were at a prior company, we were hiring folks who never met another teammate in person. They were working, it was a particularly isolating time, just culturally and socially, right? it was it was phenomenally harder to retain good talent in that kind of an environment where it was harder to invest in those personal connections, right? Because in that scenario, the job is transactional, and that's not what we want, right? We want the job to be. We spend so much time together. We spend so much time at work that it sort of taking it back, we want to integrate that into our lives, right? We want that to be a fulfilling experience for us. We want to feel motivated by the work that we're doing and who we are doing it with. And I think um, it does have a, like I said, this like two-way kind of responsibility between a company and the people who are working there to mutually benefit in that way.
How do you help people find their way through all the change, uncertainty, and overwhelm that seems to be everywhere these days?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think transparency is a critical component of this, right? If you've built trust with the people on your team, if folks feel like you are being authentic with them, and you are who you say you are, and you act in accordance with your values and your team's values and your company's values, and you were transparent with them about what is going on and why, uh, I think again you tend to find that individuals, and by extension teams, are more durable, and they're more resilient, and they're more flexible, and they can sort of deal with the uncertainty. I think in most cases uncertainty and kind of the deterioration to culture that can happen as a result of that tends to stem from either a lack of transparency or a lack of context, right? Again, people want to do the right thing, they want to make the best decision, and so if you can be honest, if you can provide the context around why something is happening, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody needs to agree, right? Especially as teams get larger, it's almost impossible to operate from a place of consensus as the means by which you make decisions and move forward. But I think that if you've done all those other things really well, if people feel like their unique contribution is valued, like they're able to work on problems that are motivating for them, like they're able to use their skills in a way that empowers them and brings them energy, and that they can see what the impact is of the work that they're doing on the business or on customers and on the people that they are working with, they tend to be more resilient to some of those things. Change to a certain extent, uncertainty to a certain extent, especially today, is uh, outside of a lot of teams control, a lot of companies control, and so it's less about hiding that uncertainty or hiding that change, and more about sort of embracing it and making sure that you've built teams that can respond, because I think that's kind of what differentiates a successful team from a less successful one is their ability to kind of respond and react in the face of some of those headwinds.
How do you track that ability to respond and react for individuals, for teams, for the company overall over time, and ensure that any trends in directions that you don't want it to go are caught early enough that you can take action and turn it back around?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways that we do that. One is we talking about explicit expectations, we sort of set the explicit expectation that managers meet with the people on their teams no less frequently than every other week. I think part of identifying folks who are either struggling with that change or who are slower to react to that change or resistant to that change is you kind of have to sit down and chat with them, right? Like what's keeping you up at night. One of the questions I always ask in the skip levels that I do with the folks who report into the people who report to me is, what are we not shining a bright enough light on as an organization that you think is, potentially problematic for us? And so I think that is part of sort of that temperature check of, hey, are people struggling with the change? Are they unclear on the direction? Is there too much uncertainty in the business that we need to help to clarify? We run a quarterly anonymous developer experience survey that also focuses not just on tooling and technology, but context switching, clarity of direction, and the roadmap. Perceived productivity. We're always looking for ways to create opportunities to generate signal around how people are feeling so that we can respond to that as early as possible, because by the time someone's burnt out or disengaged or looking for another job, it tends to be too late. And that's the most expensive time, in terms of time and financial value, to try to bring someone back, is when they've already kind of hit that extreme. So I think it's important that you're checking in with the people on your team on a regular basis to kind of understand what is stressing them out. Are they continuing to feel challenged? Are they motivated by the work that they're doing? And to, if there's misalignment there, to do what you can to course correct and reset that alignment as early as possible.
All this squishy people stuff can be pretty uncomfortable, especially for engineers who often we went into engineering so we didn't have to deal with emotions. How do you recognize that the comfort may not be there for a person or a team, and how do you work with them to increase that, since this is so critical to the way that you approach everything at Patient?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to a couple of things. First, everyone's got a different personality, right? And so even in our initial one-on-ones that managers have with people on their teams, one of the first questions that we encourage folks to ask is, how do you like to be recognized? And it's interesting because you'll have some folks that are like, shout it from the rooftops, I want everyone to know about this achievement. And others are very much, don't say anything in public, you can tell me directly and that's it. I don't want anyone else to know. And I think it's important that question gets asked, because no one is saying I don't want to be recognized. No one's saying I don't want to know when I'm doing a good job, or when you see an area that you think I can improve. It's really around how they want that to be shared, and what inspires and motivates them around receiving that feedback. And so I think, to a certain extent, creating that understanding helps folks feel more comfortable. Again, all kind of comes down to trust building. Helps people feel more comfortable that they can achieve the goals that they want to achieve, in concert with how they want to achieve them and be recognized. I think, for that achievement. Again, I think it's not that we're, you know, asking people to come into a meeting and talk about their greatest fear or their most vulnerable personal moment, outside of a work setting. But I think, again, if you talk about, one, if you ask people what worries you about the way that we're operating, what worries you about um, the direction that we're headed in, where do you not see alignment with your career goals. You can ask all of those questions, but you then have to take action on those things, right? You've got to do it quickly. So whether that's working to find an opportunity for someone to work on something different if they've been sort of slogging through some big refactor that's just been draining all of their energy, or creating an opportunity for someone to lead a project that maybe has more visibility because that's the thing that really motivates them, or maybe it's giving someone this huge, legacy code base upgrade where it's sort of the quiet victory, but they know that the work that they're doing is what's helping to kind of propel the company. Matching those things up, I think, helps to kind of give people that confidence and to build that skill and to recognize that again, it's not touchy feely. Let's like sit in a circle and talk about our emotions, but it is about recognizing that we are unique and that we are people and that we're not machines where you just like feed requirements in and get software out on the other side. That finding those matches and creating those connections and those opportunities, I think, again, leads to better results. There are absolutely companies and people who want to put their headphones on and they want to get their set of requirements and they want to execute against those requirements, and that is what is fulfilling for them. um, it is my perspective that the value that engineers bring to any organization, patient included, is not in their ability to write code. And I think we are reckoning with that as an industry, especially in the face of AI. The value of an engineer is in their ability to come and solve problems. And solving problems tends to be a team sport, right? It's something that we do together because we need those unique perspectives. We need someone to challenge our thinking. We need someone to tell us that we're missing something. And so it's the team and their ability to kind of work together and to push each other forward that I think is ultimately what makes for a successful engineering organization, especially, and any company more broadly. But those are the skills that we really look for when we're hiring. So part of that culture building starts there, right? It starts with what are the intangibles, what are the values that you're looking for in the people that you're bringing into the organization, and how can they help to amplify that, how can they help to grow that in the other people who are there and who will come in the future. I think that's a big piece of it as well.
It's a very engineer friendly way to approach all this squishy people stuff because you are asking all those squishy people things without explicitly getting into this, what's oftentimes the scary pieces of it. How am I feeling? What am I here for? Instead, you're focusing on what do you want to be doing right now? Where are you looking forward to? What's holding you back from what you'd like to be doing right now? And you're simultaneously demonstrating your respect and curiosity and love for the person while also getting this tactical data that you need to move the business forward right now, and simultaneously getting that strategic information you need to help the company continue to thrive down the road.
Yeah, I think it's important because we uh, we can very easily take for granted, I think, the value that individuals bring to a company beyond just what is in their job title. And I think you see this more at startups, earlier stage startups especially, where folks tend to wear a lot of hats and titles tend to be very fluid and maybe a little bit made up. That there's just this very broad set of capabilities that people have, right? At my first startup, in a day, I might um, write some code, answer a support email, talk with an investor, and go run customer research along with a designer all at the same time. That was very different than what my quote unquote job title was at the time. And so I think extending that as companies continue to get larger, yes, you need to start to build specialization, and not everyone can do all things as companies get larger and communication channels get more complex and software gets more complex and everything else. But I think recognizing that a software engineer actually has an English degree and might be able to bring some of that background to help us write clearer, more understandable documentation. I worked once with a software engineer whose background was in linguistics, and she happened to write phenomenal API documentation as a consequence of that. And so, thinking about ways that people can bring those talents and those curiosities into the workplace, again, I think it helps ultimately us to build better teams and better products.
And the more we as leaders can draw these lines, connect these dots for ourselves, the more we can help our employees do this. So that linguistics major may never have thought about applying that to writing documentation. But when you made that connection, then you could go and say, because this and this and this, I wonder if you might enjoy doing this. Would you like to give that a shot and see what happens?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
In business, we talk about delighting our customers all the time, and we never talk about delighting our employees. Delighting the employees is even more important, I believe, because if we aren't delighting our employees, then it's really hard to create anything that's going to delight our customers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, ultimately, I think the art of product development is sort of seeing the gap between what people say that they want and sort of the challenge that they're trying to convey. And so if the folks who are working on solving those problems are motivated, if they're engaged, if they feel like they have an opportunity to bring this talent, this perspective to bear in solving those problems. Again, I think we see time and time again that they are more likely to come up with more creative solutions that more correctly address the problem, that they're able to bring it to market faster, that it's a better quality product overall. Like there's wins kind of across the board. um, but it starts with teams who feel like they are comprised of individuals who are engaged and motivated and valued, and that who they are as a person and the talents that they bring is that those things are all appreciated. I completely agree with you. I think it's more important because it is what begets that customer delight at the end of the day.
For people, Jordan, who would like to learn more about how you're creating this amazing culture at Patient, or who might like to come and have a job with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn, Jordan M. Stone on LinkedIn. I've also got a Substack where I write occasionally about engineering, technology, and leadership. So folks can find me on Substack as well. So either of those would be great. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to chat with anyone and compare notes.
Sounds great. And we'll have those links in our show notes. What would you like to leave our audience with today, Jordan?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that um, if I could influence anyone to kind of change the way that they're thinking after listening to our conversation today, I think it's to encourage people to really kind of get back to the fundamentals of building some of these like personal connections with the people that they work with. Um, we spend so much time day in and day out with these people, and everyone has um, something that they hope to achieve. They have something that's going on outside of work that they're proud of or that they're concerned about. All of these things, I think, influence how we get work done, how we achieve the most aspirational objectives together. Um, just find a peer, ask them what they're hoping for. There's 6 weeks left in the year. One of my favorite conversations to have is, if you were to sort of look back on the year, what's the story that you want to tell? Find out what that is for people, and I think you'll be surprised how you can kind of create some of those deeper connections and just ultimately get better work done.
Thank you, Jordan, for a lovely conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It was great.
And thank you, audience, for joining us today. Jordan and I would love to know, what is your story for 2025? And what would you like your story to be for the year to come? Thanks, and have a great day.